I'm not going to cover stones for mediumship. I'll let Linda do that, but remember, the greatest aid to the development, the cultivation and the ongoing maintenance of mediumship is using the mineral kingdom, co-creating with the mineral kingdom to create, let's say, a type of crystalline transformation within the endocrine system. That's really what's key to producing good mediumship. As far as the mechanism is concerned, and the other thing is psychological clarity and purity of motive, which we've dealt with constantly, we deal with extensively, because as far as we're concerned, that's the ABC of integrated spiritual growth and development. The process is of channeling is very much a receptive one. It's about receiving, it's about listening on all kinds of levels, so about openness and receptivity and acceptance, and then the translation of that into some kind of form. And that form may be language, or it may be some sort of artistic or musical expression, which is then meaningful to those that are on the receiving end of that, meaningful in a way that produces on their part an openness, a receptivity and an acceptance, and correspondingly and as a consequence then an allowance of their own personal transformation alchemically, so that they become the clearer, brighter vessel for the spirit that animates them, rather than operating as an egoic separate self. So really any other use of mediumship is something of a misuse. Psychic, to those people who work psychically, and they just deal with the astral plane, they deal with reflecting the emotional, the desire body. They are receptive to the other person's desires, and then that person just tells the person that they're reading off what their desires are. Big deal, you know. Oh, you want a man? Oh, you're going to get a man. Give me another $100. It creates dependency. It's not about self-determination, and so from my perspective, that's a childish expression of mediumship, and certainly the lowest form of mediumship. And I have spoken and written about that extensively, so I won't go more into that here. And the beginning of the higher forms of mediumship is clairaudience, clairsentience and clairvoyance, all of which utilise the lower four body system, physical, emotional, mental and primal soul level, as the interpreter. So it's the very beginnings of what we might call high sense perception. Clairvoyance is about seeing stuff, symbols, auras, whatever, and then engaging the conscious mind with what it thinks it knows to interpret that in the same way that you would use tarot cards or runes or whatever. So to my mind, what's the point? It's the point of closing your eyes and clairvoyantly reading the person's energy, letting the subconscious mind turn that into symbols or colours or whatever, and then just giving a very empirical style interpretation of that. You may as well just use tarot cards, to my mind. Other people, particularly clairvoyants who make a lot of money out of it, will obviously have a different opinion. And clairaudience is the same. You hear stuff, which you then use the mind to interpret and relay back. You know, once again, why not just use tarot cards? And clairsentience is just sensing stuff, generally, often quite vague sort of feelings which are sort of mixed up with your own emotive responses and so on, which you then sort of think about and then interpret as though, consulting and decoding like you would with using a code book. The problem with all of that is that when you engage the conscious mind with what it thinks, then you're placing a massive limitation on things, and you tend to reflect whatever knowing is moving through you. You tend to reflect that more within the context of being relevant for you than particularly relevant to the other person. When you get into the higher forms of high sense perception, which is before direct knowing, which is a different process, we work with direct illumination, inspiration, and the higher forms of intuition, which is what we encourage people to develop. To be able to do that, you must be able to completely disassociate with any form of identification with the mental body. As I've said, thinking, really, for the most part, is just talking to yourself. You don't go around constantly talking to yourself out loud, but most people go around constantly talking to themselves in their head. And to be honest, if most people were verbalising what was going on in their head, they'd probably be deemed stark raving mad and locked up. Truth and language have nothing to do with each other. In actual fact, we associate thinking with language, but animals think and reason and rationalise, make decisions using rudimentary thought processes, but they don't use language. It's very dangerous to only use the lower mental body with language as input and language as output. It's very dangerous, because you just lock yourself up into a delusional state of what you think you know, and you can get into this situation where you can talk yourself in or out of anything. That's really something that, if you want to be in genuine self-mastery, you must unlearn. When you really self-inquire honestly and start to truly observe what is occurring within the four-body system, you come to realise just how much self-imposed limitation you have applied to what the potential is. Channeling some sort of higher knowing, or the universal consciousness, or even channeling guide energies which are involved with the evolutionary progress of a particular soul, is all about getting out of the way. It's about empathising with the person or the situation, the group consciousness, whatever that you are engaged with, empathising so that you can monitor in real time the way that what you're sharing is being interpreted and received. Because it's no good you, oh yes, I'm really clearly interpreting what I'm saying, and the person or whatever the subject is receiving that message completely interpreting through a lens of fear or completely misinterpreting because of their own filters. What is important is the evoked response, not how technically perfect what you're doing is. It's the evoked response, being of love and producing enlightenment and so on. So it certainly is not about you. So you really need to be able to get out of your own way, and you need to be able to disassociate from the thinker. To allow the knowing which is flowing through you to best express itself. So that which you call I has absolutely no place and can take absolutely no credit, no satisfaction, no pleasure in the process, because all that which you call I must do is step out of the way and not involve itself in any way, and allow this, the four-body system, to become the vessel for the expression of something in such a way that it produces a particular outcome, which is set with a very strongly held intention. Intention is all about alignment, and the only part really that the mental body has in the process is maintaining that very fixed alignment to keep those channels open. You have to learn to not think about what's coming through, to not have an opinion, to not be concerned about the apparent response or reaction of the person that you're sharing with, or whatever the target of the channeled experience is. And you must ultimately trust in the inherent benevolence of doing channeling in that way, that it will be produced, that the outcome will be something which is generated from that intention of an outcome of the highest good of all concerned, and that if you maintain that place of empathy and compassion and unconditional love and generosity of spirit, that the channeling will produce the desired outcome, which is enlightenment, greater understanding, insight, a certain amount of guidance as to what is necessary in order to allow the person or whatever you're channeling for, a group or whatever, if you're doing a talk, which it will allow them to be able to move beyond their self-imposed limitation and the limitation which is imposed upon them, and allow them to self-actualize in some way. I did readings for many years, and I was astounded. People would drive for 12 hours and stay overnight in a motel to come and have a reading with me, and for a long time after I started to do it, sometimes I'd be horrified at their reaction. They'd get quite animated. Sometimes they'd get up and they'd storm out, and I wondered if I'd done something wrong. And it was amazing. It was those people that had the most profound reactions, that always wrote me a letter or rang me up 6 months or 12 months or 2 years later and would say, "Oh my God, that was the best thing that ever happened to me. That was exactly what I needed to hear. It was exactly what no one else had actually had the balls to tell me." And I was just sharing what was coming through. And of course then there's the other people. I would only ever do a reading on a 12-monthly basis, because a good reading should have at least enough guidance to last 12 months. And people started to come back year after year, and sometimes they'd get quite annoyed and they'd say, "Oh, you're a fake, because that's almost word for word exactly the reading that you gave me last year." And I'd say, "Well, did you do anything about the guidance? Did you actually change anything in your life? And they'd say no. They'd say, well, of course you're going to get the same reading. I didn't even remember these people. People would come for another reading after 12 months and they'd say, oh, remember you said no. You know, I don't know you. I have no interest in your life. I'm not invested in you in that way. Unless they would become students, and that's about walking side by side with people towards a particular spiritual goal as far as personal spiritual development is concerned. But that's a different subject. So you've all worked extensively with with various success, of course, with allowance and acceptance, with surrender, with receptivity, all of these qualities which are necessary. And I hope you've come to understand that the paradoxical nature of some of these states, where although there is that receptive quality to it, there's also this assertive aspect to it, which is protective of that state, which is containing of that state. So what I want to do over the next couple of days is put you through your paces with being able to shift in and out of particular receptive states, and to be able to quickly attune to particular sources which you use for, which you co-create with for doing particular types of channeling, and give you some exercises which you can take away and then start using on an ongoing basis. Channeling is also only as good as how much you practice. It's no different to learning a musical instrument or running and developing your stamina and whatever. It's very quickly lost, and it's something that you must practice every day. So part of your spiritual practices on a daily basis must be that which will keep you fit as a channel. So to share those sorts of things with you, and then we're going to get you to attune quickly to particular sources, see how well you're able to do that. You've got to be obviously not self-conscious, not embarrassed, not caught up in your own little personal myth and so on, and we'll video that, and towards the end of the retreat we're going to video you again, so you have a sort of a bit of a before and after. Hopefully there's some kind of
progress,
perceivable difference towards clarity. What would you like to add?
Well, really, you kind of expressed in different and somewhat more detailed way some of what I shared yesterday, but I really wanted to stress again the importance of that space and that state of being you need to be in to channel. If you enter that space, and some of you have experienced that when you've been facilitating in some form or another, and you enter that space where there is a deep sense of alignment and a centering in the spirit self. It's not centering in the ego, and the mind has to get out of the way, and you enter a state where you are in a certain amount of oneness and unity with whatever it is that you're attuned to and aligned to and connected into, that you can then channel. And it's then allowing that knowing. It's not like you grasp the knowing and try to pull some knowing here so you can channel. You have to allow whatever's there to be channeled, because spirit knows what is required or needed in a particular context, and then it's up to you to stay out of the way, to stay in that space of connectedness and surrender and unity and unconditionality and compassion. If you find yourself in front of an audience or a client, and the audience or the client has a particular reaction, and then you react to that, let's say that maybe the audience are having trouble getting what you're translating for them, because you are maybe not doing it in a way that that they can relate with. But if you start to
or at the right level,
because sometimes the knowing that comes through, the knowing that comes through is always relevant, but how and what level and how you express it so it's relevant for the audience and where the people are at and how they can relate with it is really your job then. You as the spirit self, not the separate self, not the mind. But if you find yourself then reacting to the audience reaction, you start to take that personally, oh, they don't like me, or you start to judge someone who's having trouble, who is really fighting the receptivity of what you're sharing, etc., etc., then straight away that means you're out of that space that you need to be in for channeling. And so you need to be out of the way and stay out of the way. If the audience, the person that you're sharing for, is having trouble or is reacting, it's not about you. You just do your best to then produce that outcome of love while remaining in the integrity of the knowing that comes through. So really all the tools that you've been learning and all the things you've been practicing, instead of being aligned and centered and staying in the I am identification, the deeper spirit identification, and not taking things personally and holding boundaries and holding a space, staying in clarity, staying in your heart, all these things that you practice in your day-to-day life are part of some of the tools that are necessary for holding that space that you need for channeling. You need to be in clarity, you need to be in mastery, and you shelve your issues and your opinions, and then you stay out of the way.
So the reason we combine the authentic self training with this is because you also need to be in a state of almost sort of vulnerability, of extreme intimacy and extreme authenticity. If you're channeling and you're using masks between yourself and your audience, then there's very little chance that you're going to achieve any sort of enlightened outcome.
It will distort what you're expressing anyway. Anything that's not about authenticity and truth is going to be a lens and a distortion through which the message is distorted, and the clarity of the channeling straight away is affected.
So it's very important to be able to bring yourself authentically to your audience without expectation, without self-consciousness, without any form of embarrassment, without any attachment to outcome, without any sense of superiority, spiritual pride or intellectual pride. All of those things are just completely mutually exclusive to the sort of channeling which is going to produce an enlightened outcome. So part of what we are doing is to help you to move beyond masks, things that you hide behind, that perhaps you may be so identified with that you don't even realise it is a mask. So what I'd like you to do for the next wee while is to really be honest with yourself about what you identify with as a human being. It might be that you identify as being a spiritual seeker, as someone who's on the path, as a gay man, as a mother, as a professional person. None of those things have anything to do with self-mastery, because what you do and the way that you act out, the way that you express yourself, should never ever define you. You must be spirit identified. You must identify as that, the animating spirit, and be aware of the full range, potential and palette of expressions that you have, but not define yourself by those expressions nor identify with them in a way which takes you away from spirit identification. Because if you do, all you will be able to do is to peer up into the heavens and to be able to interpret the pictures you see in the stars. That's all you will be able to do. You must be able to be spirit identified and to bring the knowing of spirit forth through your expression, which you are not identified with, but you understand as a form of communication, as a form of expression of the essence of who you are. That's the big reason why the vast majority of people who are channeling are not really doing it anywhere near as effectively as they could, because they are identified with the effect rather than the cause. They are not existing in a state of being of causality as a spirit expressing themselves in form. They are identified with form, and they are aware that there is that rather irksome animating spirit which doesn't let me do what I want to do all the time and whatever. So they've got the cart before the horse. So the most important thing is to really make sure that you are the captain of the ship as far as the four-body system is concerned, and to be able to maintain that spirit identification. So that's what I want to work on now.
I agree. Very important. And you have to really watch the thinking that you are spirit rather than actually being spirit, because that's a bit of a trap. All of you, I surely hope, work with your I am affirmations every day, and when you align and center, you can align and center as a negative ego in the negative ego, you can align and center in the separate self, you can align and center in the soul, or you can align and center in the spirit self, which is a much deeper, much more unified. It is the animating spirit and energy that animates this embodiment, and it's not the soul, it's the spirit, which are two different things. And when you align and center, I hope that all of you, certainly at an advanced practitioner retreat, do it in the I am presence as much as you can, in the spirit presence, and then practice holding that through the day, which means that automatically, really, if you do that, you have that sense of witness consciousness straight away, because you are the animating spirit, which is, spirit simply is. Spirit is love, spirit is in unity, spirit is all the sacred qualities. And that's always there as a constant, steady presence that you are centered in and that you identify with. And then you have the experience of all the stuff that happens on all the other levels in the four-body system. And that is something that you feel and that you embrace and that you learn from, and it feels as it feels, and it's a full experience. But you are always that constant, loving, wise, in isness and unity presence behind it. And so that's, anytime you get caught up in the stuff that comes up for you, the issues, you battle with it, you go in circle, round in circle with it, or you act out of it, you are not being in that spirit identification. So if you're really honest, you can really realize how much of the time you are not identify as spirit on a day-to-day level. And that's something, that's what the first thing that you need to rectify, is have that identification. And then you need to be able to hold that center and that identification while also honoring and experiencing and feeling in a grounded and real, authentic way the genetic experience, the human experience, the soul experience, and still go through all of these feelings, but remain steady in the love behind it, and continue to grow and to clear out the four-body system, the vehicle, the vessel, of all its fear-based programs and imprints, and all its lower controlling urges, in order for the vessel to be as clear as possible, for the spirit to be able to express in the most loving, wisest possible way. And it is a very different way to live. If you're constantly talking to yourself in your mind, you're not being spirit identified. When you are aligned and centered in the spirit self, the mind is calm. It doesn't go nye, 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 like this all the time. So good to really review, and all of you who are here have had that experience where you are more aligned and centered in the spirit self, and you experience that peace and that calm and that stillness and that connectedness and that love. So what is causing you to not hold that all the time, and how come you forget to keep bringing yourself back to that center and to that alignment and that sense of identification? And it's hard work at first. You got to really discipline yourself to notice every time you step out of it and come back to it, because a lot of it is this habit and the resistance of the fear that resonates within your system. Because of course when you hold that presence and you radiate that through the heart, you fill yourself up with love, it's going to bring up stuff that needs to be cleared. So it can feel uncomfortable sometimes in a full body system, in the lower bodies, but you just keep going with it. It's uncomfortable, so I'm just going to go back to being an ego, is not really much of an option that takes you towards mastery. That's a real key.
Remember, every time you speak, you're channeling. Every expression, you're channeling. But what are you channeling? Your subconscious mind, your unconscious mind, little sub-personalities which you've compartmentalised within your psyche in order to cope with life as you perceive it. A good channel will never ever have the experience of going, wow, I don't know why I said that. Wow, I don't know why I did that. Because that means you have schisms, you have sub-personalities operating within your psyche, which are at certain times triggering into dominance and taking charge of the four-body system. A good channel will never have those sorts of experiences, just like a good channel will never ever use any kind of mind-altering drug. Certainly would never ever ingest alcohol. Well, really, no one seriously on the spiritual path would knowingly ingest a toxin. Alcohol is a toxic substance, a poison, a neurotoxin. So the pleasure is obtained from, or the rush that comes from it initially is because you're poisoning yourself. So the immune system kicks into high gear to deal with the poisoning. And you're anaesthetising yourself. You're actually numbing yourself, so your system starts to shut down, so you're freed from your own self-imposed limitations. That's not the way of mastery. And really, it's a type of insanity. If you really look at it in honest terms, drinking poison deliberately for recreation and calling it pleasure. No one seriously on the spiritual path would do that. But particularly if you want to be a good channel, you can't take mind-altering substances. And yeah, people say, oh, but everything's a drug in that it affects body chemistry. Yes, but it doesn't necessarily affect your state of mind. It's not necessarily an upper or a downer. But things like coffee and alcohol and mind-altering recreational drugs, there is no place for any of those in the life of anyone who is seriously a spiritual initiate. There just is not. And anyone who says that there is, that's just an addict talking. So that needs to be made quite clear. But every time you speak, you're channeling something. Do you want to be channeling your subconscious mind or sub-personalities in there or whatever? Or do you actually want to be the clear channel for knowing, for wisdom, for the expression of love, or somewhere in between? The choice is yours. And really that's what this training is all about, giving you an understanding of the way that you develop, cultivate mediumship, and then how you are able to stay fit for that, and how then you can utilise that within whatever your chosen learnings are, your chosen expressions are.
Really, if you find yourself channeling your negative ego, your inner child, your angry, crazy woman, whatever aspect of you it is that you're channeling, then in that moment it is what you're attuned and aligned to. So that's what you're receptive to and what you're giving energy to. And that just to even notice how often you do channel like things like this, whether talking to yourself or talking to other people, just shows where you are not maintaining an attunement and alignment, which is about the higher love, higher knowing, communing with higher intelligences. So the holding the space and the state of being that you hold when you're channeling, but also in your day-to-day life. And as Michael said, if to be a good channel, it's something you need to hold and practice every day. It just reveals a lot about some of the things you're doing that are causing you to struggle and to go around in circles with certain issues and of your process. And whatever energy you channel in that moment, wherever it comes from, is what you're putting out into the world. And that's the karma you create. Setting energy into motion.
The mind is a mirror. It receives, it accepts, it does not grasp, and it does not retain. There's never been a mirror, and you can imagine if a mirror retained every image it had ever reflected. How would that be? Trying to put your makeup on or have a shave in a mirror which had every image still in it that it had ever reflected. A mirror doesn't do that. Something moves away from the mirror, it's no longer reflected in there. The mind is a mirror. But most of you use your mind in a way that it's not meant to be. You try to retain things in your mind, and you just have one layer after another, one reflection after another, after another, after another. No wonder you end up with such a jumbled mess in there. You don't use it the way nature intended. The mind is a mirror. It's not something that is meant to retain things.
It's like a still pond. Then you experience life in the moment from a much grander perspective on every level, yet grounded in a feeling way. Not just constantly trying to, oh, this happened, I'm going to hang on to this. Oh, this happened, I'm going to make sense of it, I'm going to think about it now. And it's not like that.
If you identify as being a mind, then your entire life is simply a construct. And the more that you add to that construct, the more you put yourself in a straitjacket, the more you limit yourself. You must be identified with the greater part of you, which is the animating spirit, and realise that all of these structures which allow you to exist in form are merely tools which allow you to express as you choose to, but they're temporal in nature and they're not who and what you truly are.
And the challenge for most people in doing that is letting go of the control of the small self and the mind, which is usually the main aspect where you're trying to control your life, your actions, everything from that place of the mind, which becomes almost like this censorship system. This is right, this is wrong, this is good, this is bad, I can do this, I can't do this because mom said I couldn't, or because what are people gonna say, and constantly controlling and censoring anything in order to avoid pain, in order to get it right or get it perfect or to be liked, and that's got to be out of the way. There is no authenticity and there is no possibility to be embodying the truth of who and what you really are as a spirit, as a human spirit, if you constantly have that habit of censoring and controlling everything based on what you believe, what you were taught, what's right, what's wrong, what people like, don't like, all of that. Old habits. So yes, it takes courage if you're really caught up in that, trying to control everything from the separate self and to get it right, to make it right, to avoid pain, whatever. You need to summon the courage and be in the courage to just let go of that, because there is no safety. It's an illusion. You know, it's nothing that you're doing that's about controlling from the personality is keeping you safe. What it's doing is it's keeping you small, it's repressing you, it's keeping you in fear. There is no safety in that. There is no safety in that. And in the end, you will never experience as much love and as much joy and as much unity as when you finally let go of all that control and censorship and surrender to the greater spirit that you are. And allow that. And it's, you just gotta let go of everything. You can't pick and choose. You let go of everything and you keep bringing that I am. You keep centering deeper in the heart. You keep feeling and identifying yourself as that energy deep within your core, which is flowing through and animating this embodiment. And you gotta do it obsessively until it becomes your natural state of being, and then you maintain it. And all of you are worthy of it, and all of you are ready for it, and able to do it. So all the, oh, I can't do it, I'm not there yet, or I'm not good enough, or I have too much unworthiness. Well, if you choose to believe that, that's how it will be. But it's not the truth.